If you appreciate the precision and craftsmanship of barrel-aged craft beer, you have to check out the Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beer in Chicago. This annual festival and competition promises 350 one-of-a-kind pours from the best barrel-aged brewing programs in the country. Elevate your craft beer experience with bold, uniquely crafted beers across 13 style categories. The Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beer in Chicago takes flight November 22nd and 23rd. Get your tickets at fobab.com, FOBAB.com.
Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl. This week, it's a conversation with Matt Van Wyck. He's the brewmaster of Alesong Brewing and Blending and a co-founder. And the brewery just picked up 2 medals at the Great American Beer Festival and was named Brewery of the Year for its size category. A reminder, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There you can find original articles, reviews, news, insights, and podcasts. You can and should listen to shows like Brewer to Brewer and the All About Beer podcast simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to shows. You can follow All About Beer on Instagram, Threads, X, and Facebook at All About Beer. And as always, you can keep up with all of the smoked beer news and releases by checking out This Week in Rauk Beer by searching the group on Facebook or follow at TW Rauk Beer on X, Threads, and Instagram. We also have some glassware and apparel that's available by visiting allaboutbeer.com/merch. This show and all of the work we do, it's supported by you. You can visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer. And really, a few bucks goes a long way to fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. And if you'd like to learn more about advertising on this show or any of our shows or on the website, please email info@allaboutbeer.com. Again, thanks to this episode's sponsor, the Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beer in Chicago. Experience the boldest flavors in craft beer from more than 150 of the world's best barrel-aged brewers, all under one roof. The Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beer takes flight November 22nd and 23rd in Chicago. Get your tickets today at fobab.com. That's FOBAB.com. It's always great fun to talk with Matt Van Wyck. He's the co-founder and brewmaster of Alesong Brewing and Blending in Eugene, Oregon, and I've known him for years, and his passion for beer is contagious. There's always something new to discover during our conversations, and it's always a pleasure to drink his beer. Alesong is a brewery, winery, cidery, and restaurant in the Willamette Valley wine country. All of its small batch, purposeful beers spend time in oak, regardless of style. From cocktail-inspired ales to mixed cultures to stouts, the beers are nuanced and lovely. For me, it's always great to have his beers on the blind panels we run, and the judges in Colorado must also agree. This year, the brewery won 2 medals at the GABF and was awarded Brewery of the Year for its size category. So let's not delay. Here's our conversation. All right. So Matt, first of all, congratulations on the big win this year. No matter how people might feel about awards or organizations or whatever, this is awesome. This is a real achievement, and it shows to me the work that you all have been doing for the last 8 years is really paying off, and that people notice and appreciate it. So congratulations on that. And it's,
well, thank you very much.
It was very, very cool to see. And I've been, I think drinking your beers as best that I can get them for as long as you've been open. And then your beers, obviously, well before that as well. Right before we went on, though, you reminded me that in the 8 years that Alesong Brewing and Blending has been open, you guys have only done barrel-aged beers.
Yes, that's true. That's what everything we put out is somehow touches oak, is aged in a barrel, and it's a unique model. It's not we're not the only ones doing it, but there aren't a lot.
Yeah. Hey, how hard has that been to stay on that mission from the beginning? Or has it been difficult?
It has been difficult, and I will preface it with saying that when we started, we have a direct-to-consumer model. It's very much like a winery, and every 3 months we put out 4 or 5 new beers. And in the beginning, in 2016, when we started, we did have one beer that was non-barrel aged. It was often a Belgian-inspired, or it could have been like fruited sour beer, kettle sour or something. That was our instant gratification beer. Don't save it, just drink it. There's no reason to cellar this. And we did that for a couple of years, and then we had a hard time conveying that we're a barrel-aged brewery because we weren't a barrel-aged brewery. So anyway, long story short, we did switch it up after a couple of years, and so now we're doing truly what we wanted to do, which is an oak-aged brewery, making both spirits barrel-aged beers and mixed culture sour beers. And it's been very hard. And one of the reasons is I actually drink IPAs and I like lagers and other styles. And we carry those at our tasting room as guest beers. But when you want to make them and drink them, I can't just go over to the tank and grab a Pilsner because I don't make it.
Do you still get people who come in though and say, "Oh, I'll have an IPA," or what's your closest thing to Miller Lite? Do you still get people who come in for that?
Yeah, maybe not the last thing, only because we live in Oregon.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So Rainier, sorry. Yeah.
Rainier PBR. We definitely do. And because of that, we always carry one guest IPA and we carry one guest lager. We used to carry a guest cider and guest wines, but now we make cider and wine. So we don't have to do that anymore. And then we have made collaboration beers with other brewers for our anniversary. Every summer, we make a IPA with some of the best brewers in the Northwest who we collaborate with. It ends up being their beer, but we buy it and have it on tap for June and July. So it's kind of our beer, but kind of their beer. And that's fun. But everything with an Alesong label on it is barrel aged.
With the following that you've built up, with the reputation that you all have, with just even the way the brewery works internally, would it seriously gum up the works if you started making a regular IPA or suddenly said, okay, we're going into the Pilsner biz?
Well, what's interesting, I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you that we've had that conversation weekly, monthly, for the whole 8 years that we've been operating. And as we see other breweries that inspired us, I could name names: Crooked Stave in Denver, Casey Brewing and Blending, also in Colorado, Rare Barrel. Some of those places who started out as just sour mixed culture, forward beer brewers, they're now making regular styles IPA. And, whether that's because they wanted to make them and explore that territory or the business dictated it. We look at that, we think about it, and I haven't answered your question yet, but
that's fine.
I think one thing is we have this sort of direct to consumer model where we have quite a few people who get beer quarterly as they would in a wine club. And we know they would come out and say, hey, I'll take your Pilsner, I'll take your pale ale. And then we might see a dramatic drop in our barrel aged bottle sales because people might order on price. And the other thing is, we're a very small brewery. We just won Brewery of the Year for the 251 to 500 barrel a year producers. So we're very tiny, and we're located 20 to 25 miles outside of a 200,000 person town. And so, our traffic we're not packed to the gills every week. And so if we made a 10 or 20 barrel batch of a couple different non-barrel aged beers, they might stick around longer than we'd want to for quality and freshness. And so then we got to think about size, because another interesting thing about our brewery is we don't have a brew house. We either go to a couple different breweries. One is a 20 barrel system and one's a 50 barrel system. And so right now we don't have access to a little 5 barrel pilot plant to kick out 10 kegs of beer. So now we could sell them in wholesale, and that's a whole nother thing. But that's tough too, because your margin just went down on that wholesale beer. So there's a lot of business conversations behind that we've had already.
In the 8 years then, because I want to unpack a lot of this now, but in the 8 years, have you, or I guess, what's the right way of phrasing this? I want to talk about, other places making your wort and then bringing it in, and, making the beer for you before you get to do the wizardry that you do with it. How have those relationships evolved in the 8 years? What have you learned? Is it dialed in to the point that you want it to be? And I'm going to guess the answer is yes, because otherwise you probably would have put in a brewery by now to do it yourself.
Yes, and the answer is yes, and here's the reason. Because it is absolutely not a contract situation. For the first 5 years of our company, I was the wort producer. I made every batch of our wort by going on to the brew deck at our partner breweries. That was the way it worked well, is that we had partners who said, yes, my brewery is not being used. Yes, I trust you to use it. I'm going to train you up, and then you make the word on it, make sure it's as clean as you found it. And so there is no, did someone dial it in for you so you could ferment it and package it? Instead, it was, yep, I borrowed someone's brew house today and I made what I wanted. And so that's been nice. And now, I said the first 5 years I did that. We have a head brewer who's making our wort. And you also, if you are an astute listener, you heard that we make 20 and 50 barrel batches.
Uh-huh.
And if you look at our brewery of the year size, we don't have to brew weekly, daily. We brew between 12 and 20 batches a year of wort, and then that becomes our barrels, our beer streams that are aging in barrels that get fruited, that get dry hopped, that turn into something else, that get put in different types of barrels or fermented differently. So for that reason, we have dialed it in. You asked what we learned. We learned that it's important with this model to have great partners who you can, make a little business contract with, that you're happy with working with them and at their place. And we've been very fortunate that those relationships have worked out well and are still going well today.
I like that. Um, let's talk about barrels.
Yeah.
Sort of the same question of what you've learned in the years that you've been open, and obviously you've been doing oak aged and barrel aged long before that as well. But um, I feel like for a while there were folks who were getting into this, and they had, a quote unquote barrel program, and it was a couple of barrels that were, tucked away at the side of the brew house that looked like a nice showpiece, and throw something in and hope it goes really well. And then there was, the school of thought that you're, a teacher of, a professor of now at this point, along with those other breweries that you mentioned before. And I'm always fascinated when I get to visit breweries like yours, even though I haven't been in person yet, and that's a whole other thing that we have to talk about. But it's hard to get out to the West Coast.
I know.
And then whenever I land in Portland, Jeff Allworth picks me up and takes me to where he wants to go, and I'm at his mercy. And
So I need to get Jeff down here too. He hasn't visited.
See, okay,
Time for a visit.
that's anyway. But I'm always fascinated when I talk to brewers, blenders that are so immersed in barrels and wood, that there's always something new that you're unlocking, discovering, finding. And so I'm wondering, one, what that evolution has been like, and then two, where is that curiosity taking you at this moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, from the beginning of what you said there, on, how we're different than someone else who just has a barrel program on the side. And I think that makes us unique because, lots of people make beer aged in barrels, but it becomes a very small part of what you do rather than the focus of your business. And I think that's challenging because sometimes you just have to, if you've got a small inventory of barrels at your brewery, you often just have to put it in there, hope it turns out great, and you don't have stock to blend. So one thing we have here is hundreds of barrels that we can change the character of the final beer by blending some of this, blending some of that. And that's a great tool for making the different beer styles that we do. And then, you also asked what kind of things we've learned and, gleaned from doing this for so long. I've been fortunate from probably about 2000 and I don't know, four. No, 2000 and yeah, 2003 when I started at Flossmoor Station in Illinois, and kind of got trained by Todd Ashman, who's had a long career in brewing. I learned a lot of things, but one of those is, well, I could give you a list here. Dump beer that tastes bad. Do not try to blend it away. You'll be in trouble. Have a lot of inventory stock to be able to make the beers that you want to.
Hmm.
Um, there's probably a whole litany of things we've learned, but the last thing you asked was kind of what kind of excites us and where we keep the creativity flowing. I think the great thing is there are so as the industry has evolved, and I got my first professional brewing job in 2001, so I'm one of those older guys.
Yeah.
The industry has evolved big time since 2001, and boy, there's been so many suppliers that have grown up with the craft beer industry, and one of those is the barrel brokers. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, you can get so many different barrels, um, unique things from, distilleries that wouldn't have been selling directly to people. And, you know, back when Tom Griffin was running around all over the country, going from, Kentucky to California, dropping barrels like Johnny Appleseed.
I was going to say, yeah, that was the analogy that was used at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. He,
Yeah.
he was planting these barrel programs all over, and I got to be part of that way back when. But now we can go and we can get things from barrels from Europe, and this brandy barrel, and you can get local distilleries. We've used some Westward whiskey barrels from Portland, and yeah, there's just a lot of variety, and so you can further diversify your beers and your barrel offerings just by grabbing some different barrels. One of the problems with that though is they've become more and more expensive, and right now they're not dumping as many bourbon barrels in Kentucky. I think bourbon's not as hot maybe as it was. I don't know, but they've gone up, like they've doubled in price. So that's a challenge too for barrel producers.
With that early excitement of getting your hands on fresh barrels or getting your, like trying something new or something that had come from a distiller or winery that you respected, or even getting fresh oak there. I know that there was a lot of excitement on that 20 plus years ago. um what's exciting about the barrels that you get now, or is it just you're used to it as a tool you use?
Well, yeah, when you do produce all barrel aged beers, it does just become another tool sometimes. So you have to remind yourself of I sound jaded here, but most of the time when you're working at a brewery that kicks out a bunch of canned IPA, all you live for is your little barrel program in the corner. And here I go saying, oh yeah, it's just another tool we use, but it really is just it. I always call it the fifth ingredient in beer. And it's just layering on other flavors. So one thing I get excited about, or we get excited about at Alesong, is all the barrels you get. Let's say you get a load of bourbon barrels, they all taste a little different. And so some days when we're going through barrels and tasting bourbon barrels, or even, yeah, mostly this is in our spirits barrel program, but you can have things all from Heaven Hill or whomever, whatever distillery, and you just get these subtle differences, and you've got the same base beer in it all the time. So I think I get excited about just the nuances because you're standing in your cellar, it's quiet. We don't have a brewery that's always buzzing and loud and forklifts and canning lines going. And so it's just quiet, you and the barrels, and maybe our small team. And you're like, oh man, this is going to be great. Oh, wouldn't this be awesome with cocoa nibs in it? Wouldn't this be great if we put a fruit on it or something? And I think those little nuances of barrels are very interesting. And I think they get a brewer excited because when you're making a recipe or when you're tasting out of your fermenter or bright tank, you get excited like, oh, it's a new beer. Oh, it's a new beer. And at Alesong, we put out new beers all the time. We rarely make things. We have a few things we make once a year. Sometimes we repeat them every other year, but we're often making new beers. And even if they are the same beer, they're influenced by that barrel or by the mixed culture that we use that's a little bit different. And so we've always discovering something new and kind of like that fresh new look every day you walk into the brewery.
So, so what is it about some of those certain barrels that you see or, that you're aware of where you're like, okay, let's try this with cocoa nibs or let's try this with fruit or let's try this. Like, what is it that speaks to you or, how are those barrels speaking to you for you all to be thinking that way?
Well, I think sometimes those decisions or ideas come into your head just from experience. You've had this flavor, this bourbon expression, this, sometimes the vanilla notes are higher in this, some bourbon barrels you're tasting. Well, here's an example. We've had some beers we put out that just didn't have a lot of barrel character. And you might be like, okay, these would be good for that one beer we were going to put vanilla in because you're upping the vanilla in character. And opposite, you might be having a beer that just expresses huge notes of sort of vanillins from the oak, and you're like, okay, we don't need to add any more vanilla beans to this one because it's going to be overkill. So you learn those things just by tasting, by doing. It's some of it is what we personally prefer. Brian Coombs, our my business partner and our production manager, he's pretty intimate with what we have in the cellar, and so he's tasting those things regularly and making those decisions. It just comes from experience and personal preference, I think.
I like that. Um, how often are you reusing barrels?
If it's in our spirits barrel age program, we typically use them one time. They've lost so much of the spirit character that we don't get a lot out of them. Sometimes we'll move some of those bourbon barrels into our sour cellar to make a beer called Parliament, which is a Flanders red style aged in wine barrels and moved over to second use bourbon barrels. But for the most part, we've spent that barrel with our mixed culture beers that are aging in neutral French oak barrels. We'll use those over and over. We've got some tools in the brew house to keep them clean, to kill things if we need to.
Yep.
So until they start tasting bad, we'll just keep using them over and over. And we also have 8 large format fooders now. So we also use those for our mixed culture beers.
So in addition to the Brewery of the Year award, you guys got a gold medal in the barrel aged sour category for French 75.
Yep.
That's what it's a farmhouse ale, lemon zest in gin barrels.
That's right. We were inspired by the cocktail French 75, and we took our Brett Saison because we make these larger batches of different threads. 2 of the main beers we make are a Brett Saison and then also a mixed culture sour blonde base. And those become a lot of our fruited sour beers and things like that. But when we just use the Brett Saison, it often becomes Touch of Brett, which is a dry hopped oak aged Brett Saison that got the bronze. And then this other beer was a blend of these Saisons, and it was aged for about a year in French oak barrels. I'm sorry, no, in gin barrels from Ransom Spirits. And then we just finished it with some lemon zest. And then we carbonate that one just a touch higher because the French 75 cocktail is finished off with champagne. And so, yeah.
All right. So there's 2 things that I want to ask about then, because you've done other cocktail inspired beers over the years, if memory serves. And I know other brewers have done it in the past and everybody sort of approaches it its own way. But walk me through the brewer process of discovering a cocktail that you like and then turning it into a beer version that you also like.
Yeah, so we're inspired by so many things, and we drink plenty of cocktails. And so sometimes you're just drinking something and go, I bet you we could make a beer that's inspired by this. That's key for us too. I think never are we trying to duplicate a cocktail or any beverage or anything like that. Um, we're just trying to be inspired by the flavors you get. So we'll drink the cocktail, we'll think about the cocktail, we'll pull out the main flavors. Um, we have an old fashioned beer in bottles right now at the tasting room, and you think about the flavors there. It's all about the beer and I'm sorry, the beer, the bourbon and the barrel flavors that come out of it, the vanilla, the caramel, um, sort of the marshmallowy flavors, and we'll think about how we can take a base beer to sort of imitate the flavor and experience that you're getting through that. And you know, you want to garnish your old fashioned with maybe a little spritz of orange peel, but you can't have that be the dominant flavor. So how do you give it just a little bit of orange character to mimic the garnish? And if you're using bitters, how can I add a little bit of bitter note to it? So we'll just think through the flavors and sort of create what we think will work. And then, like any beer we make, whether it's inspired by something like that or not, we taste the barrels throughout the process. And there have been times where we're like, okay, that needs to have a little sweetness added to it because, you're making a cocktail, you need some simple syrup. And so that may include blending in some other beer to get some perceived sweetness. It could be adding vanilla beans. It could be adding some other sugar source to up the gravity a little bit. So we'll just tweak it throughout the process or at the final blending to make it sort of, again, not taste exactly like the cocktail that inspired it, but some flavor hooks that are pretty close. And we've had some pretty good success with things. We've made old fashioned, we've made Manhattan. We recently had Belleza, which was a Bellini inspired beer. We have the French 75s. I think we've probably done about 8 different cocktails, 6 to 8 cocktail inspired beers.
I like that. Yeah. And I mean, you obviously keep doing it, one, because you like it, and then I'm guessing your customers like it as well. The regular drinkers are enjoying this. What kind of feedback do you get on these beers, aside from blind judging at the Great American Beer Festival?
Right. Well, those 2 things that you just said, we like it and our customers like it. That goes back to the question you asked about would it really hurt much if you just made other styles of beer? And I think it's like we really love what we're doing. The team that we have blending our beers and up on the brew deck making the beer. We geek out on these and we love it. And so what I'm very excited about, and so are my 2 business partners, is that we get to make fun beers and not just like, oh, I gotta make that one smoothie sour again because that's what sells. So we love doing it. And then more importantly, our customers do too. I think our Blender Circle Bottle Club, which 22 states in the country can get beer from us at alesongbrewing.com/join.
Look at you.
Just thought I'd throw that in there. We're very fortunate that we've got about 800 plus people in our Blender Circle that get 6 or 12 bottles, or 8 if you're out of state, every quarter. And we get direct feedback from that, whether it be they emailed us or we're sitting out at our tasting room in the country, and they tell us, and we get great feedback. We wouldn't still be doing this if all of our customers were clamoring for a double IPA in a 19.2 ounce can. Instead, many of our customers are the people that you hear, and they're out there, who are like, oh, thank you for not having 6 IPAs on your tap. And I know we don't get some people to come out to our tasting room because we don't have 6 IPAs on tap, but we can make a dry hopped Brett Saison that has flavors in people's favorite pale ale. So we got ways of drawing some of those fans in, but our customers seem to love what we're doing, and we love to make it. So that's good symbiosis.
Yeah. You mentioned that your French 75 sat in the gin barrels for a year. And I know I've had this conversation with you before, but I'm wondering, if the answer has evolved or not. But I am always fascinated by brewers knowing when a beer is ready, when it's coming from a barrel? Like when it's hit that point that speaks to you and saying, okay, yes, now we have to get this in the bottles and get this to people tasting just like that. Um, was the year for the French 75, is that just like, okay, we're going to set a timer and we'll come back to it in a little bit? Were you tasting along the way? Is this is it purposeful? Like, how do you know when a barrel aged beer is ready for the public?
We're just that good, John.
Okay.
No, no, no. I'd have a better answer than that. Just being a jerk. Actually, I misspoke.
No, I like the ego on that. Yeah, that's yeah.
Our gin barrel aged beers actually may only spend 4 to 6, maybe 8 months in the gin barrels, because we do get the gin pickup relatively quickly, and
Yeah.
we get that from tequila barrels too. So I did misspeak a little bit, but that doesn't answer your question. We have it a little bit difficult because I plugged our club who gets beers every 3 months, and I know all the beers that are coming out for 2025 because they've already been brewed. They're in barrels. They spend on average from 12 to 18 months from brew day to blending and selling. And so we have to be way ahead of the game. And we've got this calendar out, and we just have to work backwards. And some of that, to answer your question, is from knowledge, where we know that about 12 months in a bourbon barrel will be this. We've got this many barrels who are this old, this old. So we just kind of like I said, Brian knows where the barrels are, when they were put in, and we have to plan out in advance. And so if we say, okay, these gin barrels usually pick up the gin character that we want after 4 months. So this will be the window when we have to get it into barrel. And so we just plan that out ahead of time. Now, if there are times where we're like, and this usually comes with our neutral French oak barrel aged mixed culture beers, they're on a little different timeline with Brett. And so we'll make stuff, and that's and maybe it's not quite ready, or we're not liking where it's sitting, but that's why we have 75 barrels filled with Brett Saison of differing ages, and so we can say, okay, those barrels aren't quite there yet, but I'm going to pull from this stock or this batch or that barrel or that barrel. And if we have some extras, we'll throw it over here into this fooder. So we have ways of manipulating that in the cellar, and the problem, though, lies if there's a beer that we're working on that's just not getting there. Maybe it's bottle conditioned and it's taking longer to bottle condition. We get ourselves in trouble because we start to advertise what we're going to have at the next release, and not right there. In fact, we usually release 4 beers every quarter, and for our upcoming release in November, we've only got 3 because there's a 4th we have to push to the beginning of next year. So we'll just give our club members their beers, the 3 different beers. But for the release party, we always have 4 beers and 4 food pairings. So we'll just bring out a vintage beer from our cellar that we've got a little extra of, and that'll be the 4th beer. So we have ways of making people happy. We're brewers. We make people happy all the time.
What makes you happy as a brewer, aside from making people happy?
Like I said, I've been doing this a long time, and one of the things that sort of brings me joy in the career that I chose 23 years ago is making something, creating something. In our case, it's often the blending and what we add to it to make the final product. It's making something and then sitting in the tasting room or being out in a bottle shop that has our stuff, or a tap room, and having people really give you positive feedback, tell you how much they enjoy what you made, winning an award and having a million industry colleagues text me congratulations. It feels great. And whatever you think about awards or winning a GABF or World Beer Cup, the biggest thing for us is it's validation to our team here, everyone who does what we do, that you're doing a good job, you're consistently doing it. We've won 9 years in a row, at least one medal at the Great American Beer Festival. So
it's nothing to sneeze at. Yeah,
it's nothing to sneeze at, right? And again, it's not going to sell me a lot more beer. I'm going to get a little blip for some people who want to grab some touch of Brett that I have in the cooler. But man, it tells us the hard work we put out is worth it, and And even more than the medals, it's when people drink a beer and you see eyebrows raised. That's my favorite thing. If you just raise your eyebrows at me, you're gonna be like, "Oh, I've picked the right career," because it means you made something, out of your heart and soul, and I love it, and I'm willing to pay money for it, and that's huge for us.
Is there a style that you really enjoy making? I know at some point, or a beer that you really enjoy making. I know at some point it's part of the job. It's okay, we have these barrels, we're doing this. But is there something that you like coming back to because it speaks to you on a deeper level?
Hmm. I don't know if there's anything that, lights me up or I really get into, but I can tell you something that I want to explore more that I think could be that thing
Okay.
in the future for Alesong. And that is sort of, a lot of what we do in our mixed culture program is inspired by great Belgian beers and the lambic traditions. And some of our beers are pseudo turbid mash and use ingredients that you find in lambic beer. But we definitely aren't making what you would call lambic beers or method traditional. But just recently, we put out our first 3-year, 2-year, 1-year blend that we call Willamette Valley Lambic, and it was really great to taste that long of age beers because we're still a pretty young company. We're celebrated 8 years this summer, and so it's not like we can just lay beer down and be like, we'll get to it later. That's 3 years. We still are a business and need to make money. But boy, it was great to taste some beers that had been in barrel for 3 years and decide how much of that one and a 2-year and a 1-year. And part of the reason that excites me and I get really interested in it is because lambic beers were something that sort of early on, it was something that just amazed me in the flavors that I was getting out of them. And so when we opened Alesong, that's something that we always sort of, it was a little bit of our North Star that we wanted to get to. And we put it out and it worked nicely. It did not win a Great American Beer Festival award, unfortunately, but the beer tastes great. And I can't wait to maybe do another blend like that.
I dig that. Um, One other thing I wanted to dig into just a little bit is your mixed culture strain, your house yeast. What is it that you believe it does to make Alesong Alesong?
Well, here's an interesting little insider information. We don't actually have a house strain. We don't have something that we keep over here.
Oh, I
That
thought you said earlier that you had a mixed culture strain. That's my mistake for not
no,
hearing
no
that.
problem. I may have said it incorrectly, but many of the mixed cultures that we make, it's we're buying new cultures. And I should back up and state that there probably is some culture in our cellar that is living in the barrels and whatnot, but it
Yeah,
comes from the different pitched Brettanomyces, lactobacillus, and things like that we add. We haven't developed something. We certainly didn't get something from the air. We've done some sort of spontaneous things, but we don't hang our hat on. This is our culture we found. We don't have a big story about that. So,
okay.
yeah.
Well, then never mind. I mean, I
Sorry.
guess the question is getting fresh pitches, getting fresh cultures in. Um, what do you see as the benefit to that?
Well, one of the great things is always being able to get as much yeast as you want. Healthy fermentation is huge. I think a lot of times when people use the term funky and they hang their hat on that flavor descriptor, funky is a weird word. There's a lot better words you can use than funky, but people use it. I've used it myself. And part of that, those flavors, which can be described as off flavors by many brewers, are simply from unhealthy fermentations because you had a low cell count. So I think when we pitch the right amount of yeast or bacteria, we're getting the results we want. And I think that lends to some consistency in our beers. And anyone who ferments with Brettanomyces will tell you that, I still call it a wild yeast, even if I buy it from a lab because it's a little unpredictable and doesn't always work how you want. So we try to bring some consistency to our wild and sour program by getting these pitches more consistently.
Okay. Um, so you're coming off of this win now. It's pretty fresh. It was just about a week and a half ago since this happened. Um, have you been thinking about how this propels you all inside of the brewery? Like, it's nice to get the accolades and those text messages and everything else. Has it started stirring up thoughts for you of, okay, how do we keep this momentum going?
Yeah, I think it always does. I think the breweries that decide to enter beers into competitions, any competition, whether it be GABF or otherwise, sometimes you only get out of it what you take out of it, and by that I mean the first thing we did, we've gotten our judging feedback back, so we've looked at that, we've passed around some emails on things we need to work on, and so if you're not trying to make your beers better, you're failing there. So yes, some judges comment. Listen, I've judged since 2007, so I'm not making any comments towards judges. They're all boneheads, right? Myself included. But you got to take it with a grain of salt because, yes, one judge says this is too hoppy. The other judge says it's not hoppy enough. They try to agree as much as they can, but it's challenging. And there is some subjectivity to it. But you have to look at those comments and realize that that is a world-class group of judges that they put together, and you can make your beers better by listening to some of that and taking it constructively. So that's one. Two, my current role is a lot of outside sales outside of the tasting room, and so now we have something more to talk about. You know, grab those shelf talkers, grab those neckers that say brewer of the year, or put it on my sales emails, whatever. And so now hopefully you can sell a little bit more beer. So between making our beer better, selling a little bit more beer, and just smiling a little bit more than maybe we did 3 weeks ago, it's a positive thing here at Alesong.
I like that. And it's always fun drinking your beers. Before I let you go, I want to ask you the green door question. I know you've listened to the show once or twice, so maybe you know this.
I listen to it weekly, John.
Oh God, you're the one, huh? Thanks, pal.
I'm a regular listener.
All right. So the green door question. I don't have to do the premise. What's the pub or brewery? Who are you with, and what are you drinking?
I always giggle every time someone you give them the whole premise, you ask them the question, they're like, "Oh wow, that's an amazing question."
It just kills my soul every time. Where it's like, "Oh, thanks for listening."
It's just like not visiting my brewery. People don't listen to the podcast. Come out and see me, John. Okay, so here's what I'll tell you.
Here's what I'll say before you answer. Right, just to next time I come in, I'll come down and we'll do the podcast at your brewery.
That'll be perfect. You should go through the green door and come to my brewery. Is what you
that's cheaper than United these days. Yeah.
Well, interestingly, when you listen to this weekly, you hear people talk about this, and I think of a new place I want to go drink every time. I like do this exercise in my head. So then I realized this weekend, I'm like, oh shoot, I'm going to talk to John this week. I got to come up with that one thing. So here's where I'm at right now. And maybe it's because I spent a lovely weekend with my wife, but I have not been to Bamberg, Germany, and so many places that I would walk through that green door and go to, I've been to, and I'm like, no, I've already been there. So Bamberg, Germany is a place I want to go. So that's where I would head, and I would bring my wife because she loves Germany, and she is a huge Rauch beer fan. In fact, she probably know more about your other passion, which is this week in Rauch beer.
Absolutely.
Because she loves it. So she has to come along too. And I now have a 19-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old son. So because it's my green door, I'm going to take the whole family and ignite them on some of the awesome European beer culture that I get excited about in my 20s. I don't know where we're going to go because I don't know any pubs there. So maybe you can help, or we'll just go into a random one.
I think you just start wandering.
I think
Yeah.
so too. You know where? Let's put it right into the Vireman Malting tasting room because they're great hosts and they're going to tell us which pub to go to. My wife and my two kids are going to go, and we're all going to be of legal drinking age in Germany.
I
How's
love that. I love that. I think that's yeah. When I was in Bamberg last year with a bunch of friends, almost immediately after coming home, I was pining to go back.
that?
And it's not just because of like the rock beer. It's such a charming city, and it's just
That's what
so,
I've heard.
relaxed and laid back. And it's one of those like I'm sure for the people who live and work there, it's a little bit different, but it is so full on vacation mode and just fun drinking mode when you're there because there's not a lot else to do.
Nice.
And it's fun because of that. But
Well, a smoked Helles in my glass is where I would go, and so let's do it, and maybe you can come along too.
well, let me get to Oregon first.
Okay.
Sometime in early 2025, I have Oregon plans, so I will build in at least an extra day to make sure that I come down to you. And now that I've said it on the show, it has to happen. So, and
Perfect.
I'll bring Jeff Allworth.
You should. You should.
It'll be great. Matt,
Perfect.
congratulations on the big win to you and the whole team. This is really cool, and it's always fun talking beer with you. And yeah, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
Questions, comments, guest suggestions, it's all very easy. You can email me at John Holl, that's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. A reminder, go visit allaboutbeer.com. You can check out the podcast page, the merch page, and read great new content, as well as our archives, which go all the way back to 1979. Follow All About Beer on social media at All About Beer. And if you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, and why wouldn't you be, please email us at info@allaboutbeer.com or go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Speaking of that, here's a word from this week's sponsor.
Where can you try over 350 one-of-a-kind beers from all across the country? The Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beer in Chicago. Otherwise known as FOBAB, this legacy tasting event and competition is the largest of its kind in North America, promising the best and boldest flavors in craft beer over 2 days. With over 150 breweries pouring across 13 style categories, there's a drink here for every palate. Join us on November 22nd and 23rd in Chicago. Buy tickets today at fobab.com, FOBAB.com.
How can you forget? But if you did, All About Beer has a podcast channel now. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And make sure you check out probrewer.com each week for original articles from the All About Beer team. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Holl. New episodes release every Wednesday. And that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.